This is lecture 4 for Unit 5. We're going to discuss stress and health today. This is probably a good point in the semester to do this lecture because the honeymoon period of school is over. You're probably feeling a lot of pressure from many of your classes and your extracurricular activities and your jobs. And so let's talk about how you can deal with stress in a better way. But what is stress? Stress is a state of psychological tension or strain. Stress, what it is really is your appraisal of the situation and your response to that situation. All of us can cope with stress differently. And there's a whole branch of psychology known as health psychology that studies the relationship between psychological factors and physical health. One of the big areas of research for health psychologists is how does stress impact us physically? A stressor is any event or circumstance that triggers stress in your life. And your stressors are going to be different than your friend's stressors or your parents' stressors. Maybe your stressor is your friends or your family or your classes or your job. But if you can appraise stress in a positive way, that stress is no longer negative. It will energize you. It will motivate you. And once you overcome that stressor, you will have a stronger sense of self-purpose and self-esteem because of it. Those of us who cannot oppress stress in a positive way are more prone to chronic illness because of stress, especially if that stress is prolonged over a period of several years. Now, how do we know how stressed out we are? Well, there's a survey. The Social Readjustment Rating Scale, or the SRRS, assesses impact of major life changes. So if you've had certain things happen in your life over the past year, you could be more prone to being stressed out than someone else. Tomorrow in class, you're going to be taking the college undergraduate stress scale, and you will be given a score based on how many of these events have happened in your life within the past year. Where are the sources of stress coming from? Really, everyday hassles. You've got pressure. You have pressure to do well in school. You have pressure from your parents to get into a college. You have pressure financially. You have pressure from your friends. And oftentimes this pressure can lead to frustration. Think about that frustration aggression principle that we talked about with motivation. When you have a goal that is being blocked, that is going to be a source of frustration for you and potentially a source of stress. This is the SRRS, and you can see it awards you points based on how many of these events have happened within the past year. If you have a score of over 300, you have an 80% chance of becoming sick within the next 2 years due to stress alone. So you can see for an adult, the death of a spouse, that's a 100-point value. And as all of these things start adding up, the more and more higher your stress score will be. Another source of stress is just conflict. No one wants conflict in their life. We all have conflict in our life, and that can be a stressor for many of us. But again, stress arises less from the events themselves than how we appraise stress. There are some individuals who are extremely hardy. They are people that can tolerate stress extremely well, and maybe they can even thrive on it. They're open to change, they welcome a challenge, and that stress motivates them even more. Those hardy people tend to also be resilient. They have the ability to bounce back after a stressful event and come out on the other side even stronger. And usually resilience happens because they have very strong social connections. They have a very large support system. Or perhaps it's something just internally with them that makes them resilient and hardy. Some individuals are neither those two things, and they tend to become more sick due to stress. They tend to break down. They cannot cope with it at all. But if you're hardy, if you're resilient, and if you appraise stress in a positive way, you are more likely to come out on the other end stronger with a higher self-esteem and really welcoming any other stressor to come in your life because you know that you can handle it. Now, like I said, stress can lead to chronic illness. It can also lead to death. Prolonged stress combined with unhealthy behaviors may increase our risk for one of today's 4 leading diseases: heart disease, cancer, strokes, and chronic lung disease. So if you have an individual who is not hardy, who is not resilient, who looks at stress as a negative thing and does not have the ability to overcome it, they are going to be more susceptible to unhealthy behaviors, eating poorly, being overweight, smoking. And those things can lead to the 4 leading diseases and causes of death in the United States. So the combination of stress, unhealthy behaviors puts you at a higher risk for chronic disease, and therefore you have a higher percentage or likelihood of dying because of those things. A branch of health psychology is known as behavioral medicine. The Centers for Disease Control, or the CDC, can claim that half of the deaths in the United States are due to people's behaviors. These are things that we can change as people. They are saying that over half of the deaths in the United States are due to something that we are doing to ourselves, like smoking, like drinking excessively, putting ourselves at risk for sexually transmitted diseases by having unprotected sex, not exercising enough, or not eating correctly. Psychologists and physicians have thus developed an interdisciplinary field known as behavioral medicine that integrates behavioral knowledge with medical knowledge. So this is the part of psychology that's looking at people's behavior, combining behavioral medicine with medical knowledge, and hopefully able to reach out to people to help them prevent negative stress appraisal so that they are not prone to those 4 diseases that we just talked about. Stress can be adaptive. In a fearful or stress-causing situation, we can run away and save our lives. That's an adaptive behavior, right? Our ancestors dealt with stress on a daily basis, but their stressors were they going to be able to survive another day? Stress can also be maladaptive. If it is prolonged, or what we call chronic stress, it increases our risk of illness and health problems. This is why it is so important for you to appraise stress in a positive way. No one wants to be stressed out. No one likes stress. But if we can look at it in a different light, as not being a negative but a positive, we are more likely to be able to deal with it in a way that challenges us and motivates us. Now, as far as the physical response to stress, Cannon proposed that the stress response was a fight or flight response marked by the outpouring of epinephrine and norepinephrine from the inner adrenal glands. This would be the sympathetic part of our nervous system that increases our heart rate, it increases our respiration rates, it mobilizes our digestion tract, and dulls the pain due to the flooding of epinephrine and norepinephrine. This is what physically happens within our body when we are stressed out. The hypothalamus, remember, the part of the brain responsible for the 4F, and the pituitary gland also respond to stress. Slowly, they trigger the adrenal gland to secrete something known as cortisol. And the building up of cortisol is what can lead to heart disease or a heart attack. So when your body responds to stress, the kind of initial thing that happens is you've got epinephrine and norepinephrine pumping out in a very quick way. The slower response is produced by the pituitary gland and the hypothalamus, and this is the part of the brain, part of the body that's releasing this cortisol. Cortisol is secreted by the adrenal glands, and the stress hormones that are involved are epinephrine and norepinephrine. The sympathetic part of our nervous system is what's preparing us for the fight or flight response, and then the parasympathetic is what's calming us down eventually. The building up of cortisol, of course, is what can lead to heart attack. Now, Selye was a behavioral health psychologist who created or came up with what he called the general adaptation syndrome for stress, or this is known as the GAS. There are 3 phases in Selye's general adaptation syndrome of stress appraisal. The first one is our alarm reaction. This is the sympathetic nervous system increasing our heart rate, pouring out blood. This is the shock phase of stress. The second part of the general adaptation syndrome is our resistance. This is when the hormones, epinephrine and norepinephrine, are being pumped out. And after this stage comes the exhaustion phase. Once those hormones have been depleted, our body is then exhausted. And if you look at this graph of the general adaptation syndrome, the first phase is the alarm reaction. It mobilizes us to fight or flight, to flee or stay and deal with it. The second phase is the resistance phase. This is when we're coping with the stressor. And the body's resistance to stress can only last for so long. This is why prolonged stress is so bad for your health. Phase 3 is leading to the exhaustion phase, where our reserves are depleted and we truly are just fatigued. We are tired. We are exhausted because of the stress response. Now, stress and heart disease is what most kind of news outlets and things will talk about. Prolonged stress leads to heart disease. We know that frequent or chronic stress can cause damage to the heart and blood vessels. And there is some thought that there are different types of personalities, and some types of personalities are more prone to heart disease and stress than others. On one hand, you have the type A personality. These people are competitive, they're hard driving, they're impatient, oftentimes they're verbally aggressive, they are anger-prone people. They respond to all life events, driving in a car, dealing with someone at the grocery store, with impatience and hostility. This type of personality is most positively correlated with the development of heart disease, whereas type B personalities tend to be more relaxed and easygoing. And what they did is they looked at a study, or they conducted a study of 3,000 men. It was a 9-year study. 257 participants developed coronary heart disease within this 9-year study, and 70% of those men were classified as having type A personalities. Type A's are also found to have higher levels of cholesterol, adrenaline, and non-adrenaline than type B's. The conclusion of this research study on the different types of personalities and heart disease showed that the type A personality behavior pattern is fairly strongly linked to chronic heart disease. We haven't discussed personality types yet, but think about which of the two you are. I am definitely a type A personality. I am super competitive when it comes to everything. I tend to be very impatient. I'm not necessarily verbally aggressive, but I do kind of respond to many life events in an impatient way. Type B personalities, you know who you are. You're relaxed, you're easygoing, you can go with the flow. Nothing really bothers you. According to this study, I am more prone to chronic heart disease than someone with a type B personality. Stress in the immune system. There is something within our body known as B lymphocytes that fight bacterial infections, and T lymphocytes that attack cancer cells and viruses. During stress, energy is mobilized away from the immune system, making it more vulnerable. This is why prolonged stress, even for a few days, can lead to the development of the common cold. What happens is that you're so stressed out, your immune system is not able to fight off the same kind of bacterial and viral infections that we often get, but don't affect us in any way. And stress in the common cold, people with the highest level of stress scores are also the most vulnerable to the common cold. You can see as your stress index goes up, so does the percentage of individuals who were developing colds. Again, stress and colds are positively correlated.